Kuya, what is that?
This is yoto. We also call him Toto.
What does it do?
So when you can put cards in here, and then it can tell you stories and other things about inventors and stuff, and it can show like a picture of stuff
Can you
on
show
what
me?
you're learning about. So you just like get a card, you put it in there.
Oh, so this is about soccer, huh?
Amazing
I like
work
soccer.
today,
Okay.
class. I'm
Like
really
soccer.
proud of all of you, and
Alright.
you should be.
Okay, thank you. You know what? I'm liking it too because I can make my own recordings. I'll show you. Because I've got my cards.
Have you ever asked God for something and your request was not answered as you thought? How did you feel? Hans became very sad after not having received the answer he expected. However, he never stopped trusting in the fact that God was guiding his life and was later able to better understand God's answers. Hans, a 10-year-old boy, saw that his father was approaching the house with a look of concern, and he prayed once again, "Dear God, please make it so that the woman liked the shoes." Hans had prayed every night since his father mentioned that the owner of the big house that looked like a palace had ordered a pair of satin shoes. Hans was part of a very poor family in Denmark. His father, a young shoemaker, had married his mother, who was somewhat older than he was, and worked as a washerwoman to help support the household. That order from the wealthy woman was Hans' hope. In that era, it was common for people to custom order their shoes. The amount that Hans' father would have charged for the production of those shoes would have helped the family to fulfill their dream, to have a home in a countryside. There was nothing Hans desired more than living in the country, where he could have his own garden, see the plant grow, and hear the bird chirping. Further, if he could have a goat in a pet, then his dream would have come true. Hans felt the pounding of his heart while he ran to meet his approaching father. At that time, he saw in his hands the shoes still wrapped in their spotless linen cloth. "Dad, what happened? Didn't the woman like the shoes?" he asked. "She did not even want to try them on," replied his father, trying to smile. "But don't worry, son. One day we will have a home and a garden. Oh, if only I have been able to study, I would now have a good job." Hans was saddened. He had to continue living in a tiny home in Odense. It was so small that everyone slept in the same bedroom. He went up to the attic from where he could view his mother's garden, a small dirt-filled box where some plants grew. From there, he bitterly observed as he felt that God had not answered his prayer. Although the situation was not improving, his father kept him busy trying to spark his imagination and creativity, helping him to learn to read, telling him stories, and even building him a little puppet theater. Hans loved his dad because he gave him lots of attention. However, his father was not in good health, and during the 19th century, medical sources were scarce. At the age of 11, Hans lost his father. On more than one occasion, it seems to him that God was not listening. However, Hans did not stop praying, asking him to guide his life. Hans went to school for only a short time. In that era, schools were few and very expensive. He looked for work, but he encountered the same difficulties his father had mentioned. Only those who had studied obtained good jobs, but he had to eat. Therefore, he knocked on many doors until he obtained temporary work as an apprentice to a weaver. A short time later, he was once again unemployed. When he was 14, he moved to Copenhagen. Do you remember that Hans used to pray asking God to guide his life? He did not lose faith in God. one day his prayers would be answered. On a certain occasion, he was walking through Copenhagen. His money was running out, and he was hungry. On the street, some woman noticed his situation and shared their snacks with him. He never forgot these gestures of kindness. He felt so encouraged by this action that he marshaled his strength and kept struggling to find work. Hans had an excellent soprano voice, and when he auditioned at the Royal Theatre of Denmark, he was accepted. But soon his voice changed. He was no longer able to sing. One day, a fellow theater performer told him that he considered him a poet. Hans gave the matter much thought and began writing. Because of his poor childhood, he was aware of the differences in society, which gave him many ideas for his tales for children and adults. He now studied and wrote stories that fascinated his friends' children. He worked and studied very hard. Eventually, his tales were published. The years passed and Hans Christian Andersen became very well known in Denmark. In 1835, his first volume of children's stories was published. His stories have been translated worldwide. Today, almost 2 centuries later, many of his stories continue to delight children and grown-ups everywhere. Have you ever heard about such stories as The Ugly Duckling, The Steadfast Tin Soldier, Thumbelina, or The Little Mermaid? Those are only some of more than 150 tales written by him. Despite the fame acquired, Hans did not become full of arrogance, and once when he was asked what he attributed his success to, he replied, "To God and to a prayer that God answers no to. If my father had been able to get a house in the countryside, I would have been satisfied and would have dedicated all my life to tending to the garden that would surround it." For his great contribution to the children and teen literature, International Children's Book Day is celebrated on his birthday, April 2. In addition, the most important international prize is named after him, Hans Christian Andersen. People usually say that we must have faith and trust in God, right? Can it be that to trust God is to believe that we will obtain everything we ask of Him? Having faith and trust in God is having the certainty that if God answers yes, no, or even wait, it will always be the best in all cases. He is not only concerned about giving you a home in the countryside, as Hans asked him, or any other material item. He wants to transform you into a kind, generous adult who respects others, that is useful to society, and loves God above all things. Sometimes you ask God only for visible things. However, He wants to give you much better ones, which are invisible. Since He is all-knowing and knows more than you and I, wouldn't it be better to trust in Him and ask Him to do His will? And you? Have you already had a prayer whose response has not been as expected?
No kidding.
You like
What's
it,
your
Toy?
name? Bertha, right?